To test non-GET requests, you can use extra tools like Postman, which is a popular tool for sending HTTP requests to REST APIs and test those APIs. But if you're using Visual Studio Code, you can also simply search for REST in there, and you'll find this REST client package, which you can install, which allows you to send such requests from right inside Visual Studio Code. And I'll create a new subfolder here, API test, where I will create a bunch of files that will then use this package to send those requests. And I'll add a first file called createEvent.http. And you should use this .http file extension, because if you do, this REST client extension we just installed into Visual Studio Code will automatically detect this file and simplify the process of sending such a request. Because sending such a request with this extra extension is now as simple as writing post and then the address, which in this case is localhost 8080/events. And if you do that, and you're in such a HTTP file, and you did install that extension, you should see this Send Request button. Now at the moment, it would be a bit too early to send this because we also need to attach some data to this request. Therefore, you should first of all add an extra header, which you can simply do by adding one below this first line here, which adds some metadata to the request. And you should add this header here to essentially tell the server that this request will carry some JSON data. So that's a default HTTP header being set on this request. And then below that, separated by a blank line, that is important, you add JSON data like this, by adding opening and closing curly braces, and then key value pairs where the keys must be wrapped with double quotes. And now here we can define the data that we want to send to the backend. And for this post request, we of course must send data that has this shape here, as you learned. Though the casing is not important. You can have name starting with a lowercase n, and that will also be fine. So here I'll add my name key and set this to test event. And then you need a comma, and in a new line then description, because in our event struct we have a description field which is required. So here I set a description, which is a test event, for example. Then a location, a test location, and then date time, like this, which now must have the ISO format, which, for example, looks like writing the date like this, then a T as a separator, and then the time in this 24-hour format, like this, for example. And then also the milliseconds at the end, and this time zone indicator. And with that, we prepared everything that we need to send that request. And thanks to this extra VS Code extension, we can now click Send Request, and it will be sent. Though, of course, at the moment, the connection was rejected because my server is not up and running. Therefore, I'll open my terminal here and then run this server again, this application. And with it up and running and waiting for incoming requests, we can now click Send Request. And you might get another error. This error is related to SSL, and the trick here is, during development, to simply force HTTP instead of HTTPS by adding this part in front of the address. And with that now, you can click Send Request, and a new window should open up that shows you the response that was sent back. And of course here, this response was sent back by our own application here. And you also see this log down here, which shows us this incoming request that was received and handled. And you see we got a 201 status code, and we got that data here back. And that is now the event that was created on the server. And we can of course also see this event that was created on the server by sending a GET request, because we also in our code support GET requests to /events. So in this API test folder, I'll also add a getEvents HTTP file. And in there, we can now send a GET request to HTTP localhost 8080/events. And here we don't need any other extra configuration, no headers, no request body, because we just want to fetch some data. Therefore, if we click Send Request here, this window opens up and returns us our events. Though, as you can tell, actually the event is not here. And why is the event not here? Well, it is not here because in MainGo, in createEvent, I'm actually never calling this save method on the event that was created with help of the received data. I create my event here and I populate it with an ID and user ID and I send it back, but I never save it. And of course we should do that so that subsequent GET requests can also see that event. So we should call event save here inside of this createEvent function. And with that done, if we restart this server, we'll have to create a new event by sending another post request. And now we should also be able to see that event when we send a GET request. And we do. Here it is. Please also note that if you now stop the server and you restart it and you send another GET request, the event will be gone because at the moment we're just storing it in a variable, in memory therefore, and hence it is gone whenever the application ends, which it does when we stop the server. But that's what we'll tackle next when we add a database.